In the heart of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where the air hums with the rhythm of discipline and duty, the Harper family lived like a fortress unto themselves. Their modest beige home, with its creaking porch swing and a flag that never stopped saluting the wind, was a shrine to military tradition. David Harper, the patriarch, was a retired Air Force colonel whose steely gaze could command a room as easily as a squadron. Susan, his wife, a former combat nurse, wore her silence like a badge of honor, her hands steady from years of stitching wounds under fire. Their youngest son, Michael, was a rising major, and their daughter, Lauren, was on the cusp of pinning on lieutenant colonel in the Army. But Sarah Harper, the eldest child at 38, was the ghost in their story, a name whispered only in passing. A shadow erased from the family's polished legacy. Fort Bragg wasn't just a base, it was the Harper family's religion. From childhood, Sarah learned to stand at attention before she could tie her shoes, to salute the flag before she could spell her name. The military wasn't a career, it was the pulse of their household. 3 generations deep in uniforms and unspoken expectations. Yet, everything shifted when Sarah left West Point after her freshman year. To her family, it was a betrayal, a crack in their ironclad legacy. She couldn't handle the grind, they'd murmur, their voices heavy with disappointment. David's nod was curt when she packed her bags, as if she'd tarnished the family crest. Susan's eyes held a flicker of pity, but it was fleeting, replaced by the weight of her silence. Lauren, the youngest, barely 16 at the time, watched her sister leave with a mix of curiosity and resentment, already dreaming of the spotlight Sarah had seemingly abandoned. What they didn't know, what Sarah could never tell them, was that she hadn't quit. She'd been chosen, handpicked for a covert intelligence program so classified it existed only in whispers. No diploma, no parade, no framed portrait on the mantle. Just a one-way ticket to places where the sun burned hotter than hope. For 20 years, Sarah lived in the underbelly of secrets. In Kabul, she spent months embedded in operations, her eyes sharp even in sleep. In Yemen, she hid for 3 days inside a crumbling safe house, coordinating a strike that saved 25 civilians. In a mission codenamed Iron Veil, she lost 2 operatives and a piece of her soul she's still searching for. Her scars were invisible, her victories silent, locked away in redacted files no family dinner could ever unpack. Meanwhile, the Harpers wrote their public saga. Lauren, the family's golden child, climbed the ranks with a charisma that demanded attention. Her promotions were celebrated like national holidays, social media posts from Susan glowed with pride, calling Lauren the future of the Harpers. But when Sarah returned from deployments, her boots still dusted with desert sand, no one met her at the airport. "You're always so busy," David once said over a crackling phone line, as if she'd missed a routine checkup. Not 7 months running black ops across borders too volatile to name. At a Christmas dinner, her seat was given to a neighbor's daughter who'd just aced her LSATs. Sarah ate standing by the counter, her commendations tucked away in a duffel bag in the attic, gathering dust like forgotten relics. "Not everyone's meant to shine, sweetheart," Susan had said years ago, her voice soft but cutting, over a cup of coffee when Sarah was 19, her uniform still crisp with the pride of her first commission. Those words, meant as comfort, sliced through her, becoming the quiet anthem of her life. Every visit home, every holiday, Sarah felt their echo. The Harpers never called her a failure outright, but their silence screamed louder than words. They didn't ask where she'd been, what she'd done, the birthday cards she sent Susan, the care packages with return addresses from nowhere, were her way of shouting into the void, "I'm still here." But in family photos, she was cropped out, to fit the frame. A cousin once explained, Sarah told herself she didn't need their approval. She'd survived ambushes, outsmarted enemies in the dark. She could survive her family's indifference. Yet, deep down, she yearned for a glance, a nod, a sign they saw her, not the quitter, but the woman who'd carried lives in her hands and brought them home. The weight of being invisible in her own home was heavier than any mission. And then, one day, a door cracked open, not with words, but but with a moment that would shatter the silence and rewrite her story in a single electric breath. The auditorium at Fort Bragg was a cathedral of military precision. Its high ceilings and brass chandeliers casting a golden glow over rows of folding chairs, each aligned with battlefield symmetry. Sarah Harper, now 38, sat in the third row from the back, tucked between a young officer's fiancé and an aunt drenched in too much perfume. The nameplate on her row read, "Family, Unassigned." A bureaucratic slap that stung more than it should. Today was Lauren Harper's promotion ceremony. Her sister's ascension to lieutenant colonel. A moment the Harper family had been trumpeting for weeks. Sarah had driven 12 hours to be here. Not for applause, but for a flicker of hope that her family might finally see her, not the quitter they'd branded her, but the woman who'd walked through fire and come out whole. Lauren stood at the podium. Her dress blues impeccable, her ribbons gleaming like a war won single-handedly. Her speech was a masterclass in control. Each word a polished bullet aimed at the brass and family in the audience. She spoke of duty, sacrifice, and the courage to step away from those who falter in their commitment to the uniform. The jab wasn't subtle. Sarah felt it land, a familiar ache in her chest. Heads turned slightly, whispers rustling like dry leaves. "That's the sister who dropped out of West Point," someone murmured. Sarah kept her gaze forward, her face a mask of calm. She'd learned long ago that silence could be armor. Then the door swung open. General Thomas Grayson, a legend in intelligence circles, entered with a quiet authority that made the room snap to attention. His eyes scanned the crowd. Pausing on Sarah, without hesitation, he strode toward her, his polished boots clicking against the hardwood floor. The air shifted, heavy with anticipation. He stopped beside her seat, squared his shoulders, and saluted, a sharp, deliberate gesture that echoed like a gunshot. "General Harper," he said, his voice clear and unwavering. "It's an honor to see you again." The room froze. Lauren's voice cracked mid-sentence, her note cards trembling in her hand. Susan Harper, seated in the front row, dropped her water glass, the shatter piercing the silence. David Harper rose halfway, then sank back, his face a mix of shock and confusion. Whispers erupted. "General Harper?" a young officer muttered. "The one from Operation Iron Veil?" Sarah stood, returning Grayson's salute with the precision of someone who'd earned it. Not for glory, but because she refused to let a man who'd trusted her with lives stand alone. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. The moment wasn't sweet, it was raw. A crack in the facade her family had built around her absence. But the ceremony's aftershock was only the beginning. That night, in the sterile guest quarters assigned to her, Sarah found a manila envelope on her desk. Unmarked and ominous. Inside was a scanned email, time-stamped 2 years prior, with no sender listed. The subject line read, "Reckless operation, civilian losses." It accused Sarah H. of leading an unsanctioned mission that killed civilians, urging a fringe blog to expose the rot. The words mirrored a classified after-action report Sarah had reviewed in a bunker in Berlin. A report only 3 people had seen, her, a senior analyst, and Lauren, who'd had peripheral clearance as a junior officer. The realization hit like a cold wave. Lauren, her sister, had sent it, not out of malice, perhaps, but out of envy, a desperate bid to dim Sarah's shadow. The email hadn't just smeared her, it had triggered a chain reaction. A hidden file attached to the message, buried in an old server, had been accessed recently, leaking classified details of Operation Iron Veil to a dark web forum. The breach was traced to a device once assigned to Sarah, now dormant in Fort Bragg's system. Within hours, Sarah was summoned to a cold, windowless room, facing General Grayson and 2 military intelligence officers. They didn't arrest her, but suspicion hung heavy. They demanded her communications records. She complied, her mind racing back to Lauren's email. Using her clearance, Sarah traced the email's metadata. It led to a decommissioned server, accessed 2 days ago via Lauren's active credentials. Lauren had logged into a comm station laptop, left it unlocked overnight, a careless mistake, or a deliberate one. The trail pointed to a deeper culprit, James Carver, a former colleague who'd clashed with Sarah during a 2018 operation in Mosul. Carver had pushed for a reckless strike. Sarah's veto had saved lives but earned his grudge. He'd held temporary encryption access back then, enough to plant a Trojan that lay dormant until Lauren's email woke it. Sarah requested to lead the investigation. An unorthodox move, but her classified reserve status and motive, to protect the system she'd served, swayed Grayson. He shook her hand, his voice firm. "General, the floor is yours." The task force was a bitter twist. David Harper, with his archival access, would review past campaign logs. Susan, leveraging her forensic training, would analyze the laptop. Lauren was assigned to trace system vulnerabilities. The first meeting was icy. David spoke in clipped tones, avoiding eye contact. Lauren's presentation was robotic, her gaze fixed on her notes. Susan glanced between them, her face unreadable, like a mother watching strangers wear her daughter's skin. The breakthrough came late. A security AI flagged a Trojan in a 2018 logistics file. Planted during Carver's tenure, Susan handed Sarah a folder from Iron Vale. Her voice quiet. "I kept this after you left. I thought you were running. Now I know you were surviving." It wasn't an apology, but it was recognition. A ping from a motel outside Fort Bragg led to Carver. Caught mid-upload in an old data relay room. In interrogation, he admitted targeting Sarah to strip her clearance. Exploiting Lauren's misstep to ignite the leak. "You rose too fast," he spat. "No one questioned you anymore." Lauren read his confession in silence, her face crumpling. "I didn't know it would go this far," she whispered. Sarah nodded, her voice steady. "Jealousy can burn a field down. You forgot people live there." Lauren submitted an addendum, taking responsibility for the email chain. She accepted a reprimand, costing her promotion eligibility for 5 years. It wasn't victory, it was truth. The Harper family began to heal in fragments. At a tense dinner Sarah hosted at their old home, she laid bare her career, the detentions, the decisions, the silences she chose over glory. David asked, voice breaking, "Why didn't you tell us?" Sarah met his eyes. "You never asked. And I didn't think you'd believe me." Susan admitted mistaking Sarah's care packages for apologies. Sarah slid Lauren the email copy. "Words can kill as surely as bullets." Lauren touched her shoulder, wordless. David picked up a family photo, vowing to take a new one, with Sarah in it. Sarah returned to D.C., advising NATO on asymmetric warfare. Once a month, she taught at Fort Bragg, where Lauren sat front row, challenging her with hard questions. Their family moved forward, not perfect but honest. Susan sent notes. "Are you sleeping enough?" David bragged about his strategist daughter. A new photo sat on the mantle, Sarah's face no longer erased. At a lecture, a cadet asked, "What's the hardest part of war?" Sarah paused. "Staying human when wounds want to make you a weapon." Later, Lauren brought a small cake, iced with, "General, sister, mentor." Sarah didn't need medals or fame. She needed her family to see her, not through rank, but through the eyes that once misunderstood and now, finally, understood.